Importance of Directive Principles of State Policy in India. The Directive Principles of State Policy, DPSPs, are a set of guidelines or principles enshrined in Part 4 of the Constitution of India, Articles 36 to 51. These principles, although not legally enforceable, play a significant role in shaping the policies and laws of the government. They reflect the goals and ideals that the framers of the Constitution envisioned for the socio-economic and political development of the country. The DPSPs provide a framework for the government to establish a just society by ensuring the welfare of all citizens. Key features of Directive Principles of State Policy. 1. Non-enforceability. Unlike fundamental rights, Part 3, the Directive Principles of State Policy are not justiciable, meaning they cannot be enforced by a court of law. However, this does not diminish their importance as they act as guiding principles for the government. 2. Guidelines for governance. The DPSPs provide the framework for the state to adopt policies aimed at achieving economic and social justice. They instruct the government to ensure that the country's resources and power are used for the welfare of all citizens, particularly for the marginalized and disadvantaged sections of society. 3. Moral and ethical obligations. Although not legally binding, the DPSPs are moral obligations for the government to fulfill. They direct the state to promote a just and fair society through social, economic, and political reforms. Importance of Directive. Principles of State Policy 1. Promoting social and economic welfare. The DPSPs lay the foundation for establishing an equitable and just society. They encourage the state to work towards reducing inequalities in income, wealth, and living standards. The goal is to ensure that the benefits of economic progress are enjoyed by all, including the vulnerable sections of society such as workers, peasants, and marginalized communities. For example, Article 38 directs the state to work towards minimizing inequalities in income and status. 2. Guidance for lawmakers. The DPSPs serve as guidelines for lawmakers when formulating laws and policies. The state is obligated to consider these principles when enacting legislation, especially in areas related to social justice, economic welfare, and the protection of rights. The principles help lawmakers balance the demands of public welfare with the limitations imposed by available resources. 3. Promotion of justice and equality. Articles like Article 39A and Article 46 aim to ensure justice and equality for all, particularly for vulnerable groups such as the poor, the backward classes, and minorities. The government is encouraged to make provisions for adequate means of livelihood, adequate social services, and education, as well as ensuring the participation of people in decision-making processes. 4. Fostering national integration. The directive principles advocate the promotion of the unity and integrity of the nation. Article 51A encourages citizens to cherish and follow the noble ideals that inspired the freedom movement, promoting a sense of patriotism and national cohesion. 5. Facilitating social reforms. The DPSPs empower the government to implement policies that address social issues such as poverty, illiteracy, and exploitation. For instance, Article 41 directs the state to provide the right to work, education, and public assistance, ensuring that citizens have access to basic needs and opportunities for personal development. 6. Creating a framework for sustainable development. Article 48A directs the state to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forests and wildlife of the country. Protection alongside economic development. 7. Complementing fundamental rights. The Directive. Principles of state policy complement the fundamental rights in the Constitution. While fundamental rights are enforceable and protect individual freedoms, DPSPs focus on the broader goal of social and economic justice. The DPSPs encourage the government to enact laws that ensure the fulfillment of the rights laid out in the Constitution, thereby promoting an overall framework for justice and equality. 8. Instrument for social justice. The DPSPs are a tool for realizing the vision of a welfare state. For example, The principle enshrined in Article 46 calls for the protection of the interests of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections of society. This commitment to social justice informs policies related to reservation in education and employment, land reforms, and poverty alleviation. 9. Development of welfare. State. The directive principles play a crucial role in the establishment of a welfare state in India. They encourage the state to assume a proactive role in ensuring the well-being of its citizens, providing public assistance in times of need, and ensuring the equitable distribution of resources. Important cases related to directive principles of state policy. 1. Golaknath vs. State of Punjab, 1967. The Supreme Court held that the directive principles of state policy cannot override the fundamental rights. However, the court acknowledged the importance of DPSPs and recognized that they are an essential part of the governance framework. The case emphasized the need for harmonizing fundamental rights and DPSPs. 2. Minerva Mills vs. Union of India, 1980. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that while the fundamental rights are justiciable, they must be balanced with the directive principles. The court held that the balance between the fundamental rights and DPSPs is necessary for the realization of the full promise of the Constitution, emphasizing that the basic structure of the Constitution includes the principles of justice and social equality. 3. State of Madras vs. Champakam Dorairajan, 1951. The Supreme Court in this case dealt with a conflict between Article 15(4), which permits the state to make special provisions for the advancement of socially and educationally backward classes, and the directive principles. The court ruled in favor of the fundamental rights, but the case highlighted the need for the state to consider DPSPs in ensuring social justice. 4. Unnikrishnan J.P. vs. State of Andhra Pradesh, 1993. The Supreme Court in this case elaborated on the state's duty to provide education as a part of social welfare under the directive principles. The court recognized that the right to education should be treated as a fundamental right within the framework of the DPSPs, reinforcing the principle that the state has an obligation to provide education for all. Conclusion. The directive principles of state policy are of immense importance in the Indian Constitution. Even though they are not enforceable by law, they guide the government in formulating laws, policies, and programs aimed at promoting social justice, economic welfare, and national integration. The principles of equality, justice, and welfare enshrined in the DPSPs inform the government's responsibilities to the citizens, particularly the marginalized and vulnerable sections of society. While they cannot be enforced by the courts, the DPSPs are instrumental in shaping the framework for governance in India. They provide the moral and ethical foundation for creating a welfare state that prioritizes social justice and equitable development. The importance of the DPSPs lies in their role as a blueprint for a just and inclusive society, guiding the government in its mission to achieve the ideals of a welfare state.